A diesel shop owner named his favorite Duramax on camera, and it wasn't the truck most viewers expected him to pick. 2017 to 2019, he said, because that's the exact window GM swapped its failing fuel pump for a Denso-built one. From 2011 to 2016, the old Bosch pump ground itself into metal shavings and sent them through the fuel system and injectors, a $4,000 to $12,000 repair waiting to happen. Once Denso took over in 2017, that failure vanished from the lineup entirely. This shop owner tracks which trucks keep coming back through his bay and which ones never do, and that kind of record doesn't show up on a listing price. 3 things are coming. What he checks on these years, where buyers still get tripped up even on a fixed truck, and what to look at before you hand over your retirement money. A fuel pump has one job: pressurize diesel so the engine can burn it. The old Bosch pump did that job while drinking fuel that no longer carried enough lubrication to keep its own internal parts from grinding against each other, mile after mile, with nobody behind the wheel any the wiser. This was no rare glitch buried in some obscure service bulletin nobody reads. It happened at scale to the Duramax built from 2011 through 2016. And that's exactly why a used truck shopping trip that lands on the wrong year can turn into the costliest mistake you make this decade. The pump wore from the inside out, shedding metal off itself the way a worn brake pad sheds dust, except this metal didn't sit harmlessly on a rotor waiting to be hosed off. It rode the fuel line straight into the injectors, through the rail, and eventually through the whole high-pressure system, because circulating fuel everywhere it's supposed to go is the one job that system is built to do. Owners who got hit paid anywhere from $4,000 to $12,000 to have the system cleaned out or replaced, start to finish. More than a few of them found out the hard way in a parking lot or a driveway, turning the key on a truck that flat out refused to restart. No warning light, no rough idle, just a dead stop with the key still turned in the ignition. It got bad enough that GM ended up facing a real class action lawsuit over it, an actual court case with a docket number and a settlement with hard dollar figures attached to it. Almost nobody mentions this part when they bring that lawsuit up. By the time you're watching this, the window to file a claim on it has already closed. There's no check coming for anyone reading this, and that was never the point. It means the problem was serious enough and costly enough that a major automaker chose to pay affected owners rather than argue the case in front of a jury for years. The scale here was real too. It was widespread enough, across enough of the 2011 through 2016 production run, that entire forums exist just to trade notes on it, and enough owners filed complaints that a law firm built a whole case around the pattern instead of one bad truck. That backdrop explains half the years to avoid panic you'll stumble across online. It also happens to be the exact problem GM solved 2 model years later. GM walked away from that fuel pump entirely in 2017. No software patch, no minor revision, but a different manufacturer with a completely different design built from the ground up, sourced from Denso instead of Bosch. The failure that defined the previous 6 model years never carried over. Real mechanics back this up too. Pull up almost any independent diesel channel and you'll hear some version of the same story, because these are the people who see what rolls into their shop broken, week after week, and what doesn't. One shop owner said it about as plainly as a person can say it, sitting across from a camera with no script in front of him. Asked which Duramax he'd buy with his own money, he skipped the newest truck on the lot entirely. 17 through 19, he said, better than the trucks GM builds today. That carries real weight for a working mechanic, because his reputation rides on being right about which trucks come back needing serious work and which ones don't. A guy selling you a truck has every reason to call it perfect. A guy who only sees you again when something breaks doesn't share that incentive, and that's why his opinion carries more weight than a sales pitch. When someone who fixes these engines for a living tells you the fix landed and names the years that got it, that's about as close to a receipt as you'll find before opening a listing yourself. If you've been circling a used HD diesel and steering clear of anything built before 2017, that instinct is correct. Quietly assuming newer automatically means better, though, is the assumption we're about to test. A lot of buying guides get lazy here. They find the one thing a truck fixed, call the whole generation flawless, and move on to the next video without a second look. That's a lazy shortcut, and a costly one if you copy it. The 2017 through 2019 trucks did escape the fuel pump disaster, but they didn't escape everything. And knowing the honest, complete list is what separates someone who bought smart from someone who got blindsided a year later by a problem nobody warned them about. Two issues show up again and again across independent mechanic channels and first-hand owner accounts. And you'll want to know both before you're standing in a driveway with a seller watching you poke around his truck. First, the fuel injector wiring connectors on these trucks are a known weak point. The small plug that feeds each injector its signal can corrode or work loose with enough miles and enough vibration. And when it does, you'll typically see a misfire or a check engine light tied to an emissions code, rather than a truck that suddenly refuses to run at all. It's a connector problem wearing an engine problems costume, and plenty of first-time diesel buyers panic over that code without needing to, once they understand what it really is. It's a 15-minute fix at a diesel shop, nowhere near an engine-out repair. Second, intake soot builds up on the mass air pressure sensor over enough miles, and a fouled sensor can throw the engine's fueling slightly off, which shows up as a rough idle or a subtle loss of power long before most owners think to check something as small as a sensor tucked into the intake tract. One 2018 owner who posted his own real-world numbers online reported around 25 miles per gallon on the highway, well past 100,000 miles, which tells you these engines hold up fine for the long haul when the small stuff gets handled instead of ignored. If you've owned one of these trucks yourself, or you've had either of these two issues show up on yours, drop a comment below and say which one it was. I want to compare notes, because plenty of owners online swear the connector issue is overblown, while others say it cost them a tow truck. And that kind of disagreement is worth settling with real numbers instead of guesses. A video like this, the kind that tells you what still breaks instead of pretending a truck is flawless, is useful before you spend serious money, so subscribing means the next one lands in front of you before you're the one caught needing it in someone's driveway. Neither of these issues is the four-figure disaster the old fuel pump was. Both are legitimate. Both are common enough that any competent diesel shop has seen a dozen of them walk through the door. And both are things you can plan for before discovering them in the worst possible moment. Take all of this and turn it into something you can use standing next to the truck, rather than nodding along to a screen you'll forget by tomorrow. Start with the build plate and the VIN, not the seller's memory of what he thinks he's selling. Physically confirm this is a 2017, 2018, or 2019 model year Silverado or Sierra 2500 or 3500 HD with the 6.6-liter Duramax under the hood, because a seller who describes a 2020 as close enough to be the same truck is either mistaken or hoping you won't check the plate yourself. Ask for the fuel system service history next, and don't accept a shrug as an answer. Even with the better pump, this engine still wants clean fuel and regular filter changes. And a truck with zero fuel system paperwork is a truck you should discount your offer on, not walk away from on principle. Have someone plug in a scanner before you buy, not after the money's already changed hands. You're looking for stored or pending codes tied to the injector circuits, because that's the connector issue surfacing early, while it's still a cheap fix instead of a costly one. While you're under the hood, look at the injector wiring plugs directly if you can reach them, checking for corrosion or a connector that doesn't seat firmly when you press it in. Ask the seller, point blank, whether the check engine light has ever come on, and pay attention to how quickly and how calmly he answers. A truck with an honest answer and a paper trail sitting in the glove box counts for more than a truck that's suspiciously quiet about its own history. One more thing to ask, plainly, before anything else. Has this truck ever had its emissions system deleted or modified in any way? Walk away from one that has, no matter how good the price looks on paper, because you lose the factory-known failure pattern. This whole video is built on the moment somebody starts pulling parts off a truck like this. It also puts you on the wrong side of the law in most states and can leave you holding a truck. No shop wants to touch under warranty. Bring a flashlight, look underneath for fresh weld marks or missing hardware near the exhaust, and treat any sign of cutting or swapping as a hard stop, full stop, no haggling. If the asking price feels a little high for a truck this old, remember that buyers online consistently note these years hold their value close to trucks that are nearly a decade newer, so a strong price on its own means little. Check the maintenance records for fuel filter change intervals too, since a diesel that's gone thousands of miles past its filter schedule is telling you something about how the rest of the truck's been treated, even if nothing's broken yet. On the test drive itself, let the truck sit off overnight if you can arrange it, then start it cold in front of you. A healthy truck fires immediately without excessive smoke or hesitation, and any stumble on a cold start deserves a question before you're the one paying to diagnose it. None of this takes more than 20 minutes at the curb, and every one of those minutes is cheaper than finding out after you've already signed. Walk around the truck itself too while you're out there. Uneven tire wear can point to an alignment issue from towing heavy loads for years, and a hitch or gooseneck ball worn smooth tells you this truck earned its keep instead of sitting in a garage. That, by itself, is just information worth having before you settle on a price.
People get tripped up in the opposite direction too, assuming newer always beats older by default. In 2020, GM refreshed the body style and swapped transmissions, moving from a genuine 6-speed Allison to a 10-speed unit. On paper, that reads like a straight upgrade, the kind you'd expect to pay a premium for without asking any questions at all. The 2017 through 2019 6-speed is a true Allison transmission, built by Allison itself, a name that's meant something in heavy-duty trucks for decades of hard towing behind it. The 10-speed that replaced it carries the Allison badge under license, but GM builds it in-house. That's exactly why you'll find longtime diesel owners online calling it, bluntly, not a true Allison at all. This is a genuine distinction that shows up again and again in how the two transmissions get discussed by people who've owned both trucks back-to-back. The newer truck, in other words, comes with a different, more transitional transmission, paired with whatever early production quirks come standard with any freshly redesigned model in its first couple of years on the road. A 2017 through 2019 truck, several model years into a proven platform, has already worked most of those quirks out in public, on other people's trucks, long before yours ever hits the market for you to buy. And if you're eyeing anything built before 2017 to save a few $1,000s up front, remember Section 1. That's the same window with the fuel pump that turned into a $4,000 to $12,000 bill for a fair number of owners who thought they were getting a deal too, right up until they weren't. If you're wondering whether any of this applies to the smaller 3-liter Duramax some half-ton trucks offer, it doesn't. That's worth saying. Plainly so, nobody shops the wrong listing by mistake, since it's a smaller engine built on an entirely different platform, a separate design from anything discussed in this video. This narrow 3-year stretch didn't get picked out of thin air to fill a video with a number. It's the window sitting after one costly problem got solved, and before the next generation introduced its own transition growing pains, and windows like that don't come along often in a single engine's history. There's a practical side to this too, beyond just the badge. A 10-speed transmission has more gears, more clutches, and more electronic components than a 6-speed doing the same job, which generally means more parts that can eventually need attention and a repair bill that tends to run higher when something does go wrong with it. GM's engineering isn't the issue here. Complexity is the trade-off, and knowing that changes how safe a bet the newer transmission really looks over the long haul. There's also a familiarity advantage that only comes with time. The 6-speed has been on the road since 2011 across multiple GM diesel generations, so most diesel shops have seen thousands of them and know precisely what to watch for. The 10-speed is still a relatively newer design by comparison, And a less common problem on it can take a shop longer to diagnose, simply because they've seen fewer of them. Put it all together, and the picture is simple, even though the internet makes it sound complicated on purpose to keep you watching one more video. A truck built before 2017 puts you up against a fuel pump with a known, costly failure history sitting behind it, waiting for its turn. A truck from 2020 or newer means paying a premium for a transmission that isn't quite what the badge implies, on top of whatever early refresh quirks come standard with any newly redesigned model in its first few years. A truck from 2017 through 2019 gets you the fixed fuel system, the true 6-speed Allison, and a platform mature enough that most of its weak points are already on record, rather than still being discovered by the next unlucky owner down the line. This carries more weight than a guest dressed up as advice for a video. A mechanic who works on these trucks every single week picks that exact window over everything newer GM has built since, on camera, without hedging his answer once. On price, don't expect a steep discount just because the truck isn't brand new anymore. Plenty of buyers have noticed these years hold their value unusually well against trucks that are years newer, which tells you the demand for this generation holds up on its own. No single enthusiastic shop owner needed to make the case. Use that fact the other direction too. A seller asking top dollar for a 2017 through 2019 truck should be able to produce fuel system service records and a clean scan on request. And if he can't, that's your room to negotiate the price down. No reason to panic and walk away empty-handed. Budget for the inspection before you budget for the truck itself. A scan, a look at the injector connectors, and a fuel system history check cost you an afternoon. And any seller who resists all three has already told you something. Set your own ceiling before you start looking. Not after you've fallen for one particular truck sitting in a driveway with the engine running and the seller smiling at you. Decide what a clean example with full records is worth to you. Decide what you'll knock off for missing paperwork or a failed cold start test, and stick to those numbers even when the truck looks perfect in photos. The fix worked. The window is narrow, 3 years wide and no more. And it isn't a coincidence that a working mechanic keeps landing on the same 3 years without anyone paying him to say it. Whatever you decide, you're no longer relying on a stranger's word alone or a gut feeling in a driveway. You've got the fix, the years it applies to, and the things to physically check with your own hands. And now you know exactly what it looks like from the outside, before you're the one signing the paperwork and driving it home yourself.